of the Washington Post.
But let's go first to congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins, who is inside the House chamber. And Lisa, we should explain to our audience that you are in the chamber in the press gallery above the House floor, just behind the rostrum where President Biden will be speaking. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. You know, this is certainly a crowd that has, the atmosphere here is very upbeat. I would not say it's electric. I think this is a Congress that is still determining its own identity. Is this a place where we are going to see bitter divide and anger, or is this a group that is going to be more collegial with each other? This speech is going to be part of that conversation. Tonight, we do see most Republicans on one side, most Democrats on the other, but so far a very upbeat mood in the crowd.
And there's the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi alongside Steny Hoyer. Amna?
Yeah, we're watching and keeping an eye on the House chamber there. And of course, we'll let you know as soon as we watch President Biden enter that room. In the meantime, we have our own White House correspondent, Laura Barone-Lopez, who is also watching from Capitol Hill. She joins us now as well. Laura, we know you've been talking to your White House sources, getting a preview of what we expect to hear from President Biden tonight. Give us a sense of what we should hear.
That's right, Amna. So the White House officials I've been talking to say that President Biden is going to talk about finishing the job that he started when he took office 2 years ago. And he's going to focus heavily on the economy, trying to express some empathy, but also optimism about the road ahead. He's going to specifically refer to the...
All right, we are back. Just started live streaming once again, ate some food, and we're here. Looks like he is about to enter. Biden, that is, obviously. Maybe.
Long
Laura,
ago,
we should
that
say here
COVID...
is William McFarland, the House Sergeant at Arms, announcing President Biden's arrival.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And Laura, forgive me for stepping in there, but pick up where you left off, please.
That's right, Jeff. So the president is also going to say, according to excerpts, that COVID no longer controls our lives, and he's going to make a plea to Republicans about finishing the job that he started, saying that the midterms ultimately decided that.
You know, it's funny. Bits of the president's speech when they do these State of the Union addresses will get leaked to the media, and then they'll be reporting on what he's going to say, which is such a strange process. I don't need to know. Just I'll watch it. I don't need to know what he's going to say and then watch him say it.
Through the laundry list of his objectively historic achievements, this is coming at a time when there is growing dissatisfaction in this country. There was a recent poll that found more than 6 in 10 Americans believe that President Biden hasn't done very much. How does the White House confront that? How do they change that narrative?
I mean, this is the era we're living in right now, one in which it's not just that the president...
As I like to say at the start of live streams, we just went live, so in case you're wondering where everyone is, that is why we just hit the go live button, didn't even have a scheduled thing up because of quite the debacle that took place. Not really. I just accidentally started too early and then ate food and came back. So here we are. Should be a very interesting night.
Very few priorities from Democrats are the same priorities as Republicans. In fact, the Pew poll that came out this week found there was just one of the top 4 for Republicans showed up on the top 4 for Democrats. The economy, not surprisingly, but in 2019 there were 0 overlaps. So this is, for the president, he can't fix that, right? That is part of this the system that is in place right now, where actually being a compromiser, doing unity, as the president will talk about tonight, it might sell in terms of making a speech, but in terms of selling it as a political strategy, it doesn't. It's not going to work as well.
David and Jonathan, I know you're both watching and we're waiting to see what the president says here. Bipartisanship is a big part of what we know he will be talking about, but also a lot of folks are watching to see if this is sort of a soft launch for a re-election campaign. David, what are you watching out for tonight?
Well, that 62% who think he hasn't done much that Jeff mentioned, the administration believes that they can sort of fix that. A lot of the infrastructure spending that was passed last year, those projects are actually going to happen this coming year. And so expect to see Joe Biden, if somebody's filling a pothole, in front of your street, Joe Biden will be there.
He will be there,
Cutting the
shovel in
ribbon,
hand.
putting up the sign, Joe Biden did this for you. And so when he talks about what the campaign is going to be, he sounds like he's running for mayor. And so I think he'll be laying out, no, I really did do this, and here's the real result.
And we know he's hitting the road immediately after this to do exactly some of that. Jonathan, what are you looking out for tonight?
I'm looking for the president, in addition to him laying out all of the accomplishments, I'm looking for tone. I'm looking for him to speak to the hearts of the American people, not just I fixed your roads and I fixed your bridges and I've done all these things, but I understand the pain and frustration that you have vis-a-vis the economy, but also I understand the fear that you have vis-a-vis law enforcement and the cops. We know that there are going to be, I think, 16 family members of people who have died at the hands of police. We know that Tyre Nichols' parents will be in the audience. So I'm looking forward to what the president might say with regard to not just directly to the Nichols family, but to all those families around the country, particularly African-American families for whom interaction with law enforcement is not usually a positive thing.
To the point about tone, we know the president's going to emphasize bipartisanship. There has been an internal debate among his advisors, I'm told, about how tough he should be on Republicans. As the president is about to take the microphone there, I guess we'll find out. Hold that thought.
Here we go.
Hand copies of his speech to both Speaker McCarthy and to Vice President Kamala Harris, as is tradition. They will hold on to copies of those speeches. That itself has made for some memorable moments.
That's
in the
right.
past.
And the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, said he's not going to rip up the speech this year.
Thank you.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you. You can smile. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, good to see you guys up there. Members of Congress. By the way, Chief Justice, I may need a court order. She gets to go to the game tomorrow, next week. I have to stay home. Got to work something out here. Members of the Cabinet, leaders of our military, Chief Justice, Associate Justice, and retired Justice of the Supreme Court, and to you, my fellow Americans. You know, I start tonight by congratulating the 118th Congress and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy.
All this, by the way, as y'all are surely aware of, is very intentional, making sure he does that for a purpose. So we'll see if we agree with all these actions.
No reputation, but I look forward to working with you. And I want to congratulate the new leader of the House Democrats, the first African-American minority leader in history, Hakeem Jeffries. He won in spite of the fact I campaigned for him. Congratulations to the longest-serving leader in the history of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Where are you, Mitch? And congratulations to Chuck Schumer, another term as Senate Minority Leader. I think you Only this time you have a slightly bigger majority, Mr. Leader. You're the majority leader. About that much bigger? Yeah. Well, I tell you what. I want to give special recognition to someone who I think is going to be considered the greatest speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. Folks, the story of America is a story of progress and resilience, of always moving forward, of never, ever giving up. It's a story unique among all nations. We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it. Look, folks, that's what we're doing again. 2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years, because of you all, because of the American people. 2 years ago, and 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threats in civil war, and today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken.
I'm interested to see how aggressive he is towards MAGA Republicans, since they'll be right there in the room.
A story of progress and resilience. When world leaders ask me to define America, and they do, believe it or not, I can define it in one word, and I mean this: possibilities. We don't think anything is beyond our capacity. Everything is a possibility. You know, we're often told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. But over the past 2 years, we've proved the cynics and naysayers wrong. Yes, we disagreed plenty. And yes, there were times when Democrats went alone. But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. You came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits. And in fact, it was important. And in fact, I signed over 300 bipartisan pieces of legislation since becoming president. From reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Respect for Marriage Act that protects the right to marry the person you love. And to my Republican friends, if we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well. I think folks, you all are as formed as I am, but I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view. For decades, the middle class has been hollowed out. And not one administration, but for a long time. Too many good-paying manufacturing jobs move overseas. Factories closed down. Once thriving cities.
This tradition of having the vice president and the Speaker of the House behind the president while he speaks is strange to me. They're rather distracting.
I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do. To build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. I know a lot of you always kid me for always quoting my dad, but my dad used to say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. He really would say this. It's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, folks, so let's look at the results. We're not finished yet by any stretch of the imagination, but unemployment rate is at 3.4%, a 50-year low.
Sure.
A near record unemployment. Near record unemployment for black and Hispanic workers. We've already created, your help, 800,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years. And where is it written? Where is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? And I don't know where that's written. For too many decades, we imported projects and exported jobs. Now, thanks to what you've all done, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Folks.
And then we just have to watch and see whether Kevin McCarthy will clap or not at different parts. Part of the entertainment, I feel like.
Supply chains and Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies, blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months, while take-home pay has gone up. Additionally, over the last 2 years, a record 10 million Americans applied to start new businesses. 10 million. And by the way, every time someone starts a small business is an act of hope. And Madam Vice President, I want to thank you for leading that effort to ensure that small businesses have access to capital and the historic laws we enacted that are going to just come into being. Standing here last year, I shared with you a story of American genius and possibilities. Semiconductors, small computer chips the size of a fingerprint that power everything from cell phones to automobiles and so much more. These chips were invented in America. Let's get that straight. They were invented in America. We used to make 40% of the world's chips. In the last several decades, we lost our edge. We're down to only producing 10%. We all saw what happened during the pandemic when chip factories shut down overseas. Today's automobiles need 3,000 chips, each of those automobiles. But American automobiles couldn't make enough cars because there weren't enough chips. Car prices went up, people got laid off. So did everything from refrigerators to cell phones. We can never let that happen again. That's why we came together to pass the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. Folks, I know I've been criticized for saying this, but I'm not changing my view. We're going to make sure the supply chain for America begins in America. The supply chain begins in America. We've already created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs without this law, before the law kicks in. With this new law, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs across the country. And I mean all across the country, throughout not just the coast, but through the middle of the country as well. That's going to come from companies that have announced more than $300 billion in investment in American manufacturing over the next few years. Outside of Columbus, Ohio, Intel is building semiconductor factories on 1,000 acres, literally a field of dreams. It's going to create 10,000 jobs, that one investment, 7,000 construction jobs, 3,000 jobs in those factories once they're finished. They call them factories. jobs paying an average of $130,000 a year, and many do not require a college degree. Jobs. Because we work together, these jobs are.
Yeah, you'll notice Kevin McCarthy looks over to see if other Republicans are standing before he decides what he's going to do.
The new homes, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses, so much more that's going to be needed to support those 3,000 permanent jobs and the factories that are going to be built. Talk to mayors and governors, Democrats and Republicans, and they'll tell you what this means for their communities. We're seeing these field of dreams transform to the heartland. But to maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. And folks, as you all know, we used to be #1 in the world in infrastructure. We've sunk to 13th in the world. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system.
Biden, I do think, is on tonight. Definitely sounding good.
And folks, already we've funded over 20,000 projects, including major airports from Boston to Atlanta to Portland. Projects that are going to put thousands of people to work rebuilding our highways, our bridges, our railroads, our tunnels, ports, airports, clean water, high-speed internet, all across America. Urban, rural, tribal. And folks, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. And I mean it sincerely. I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law, and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see you at the groundbreaking. Look, this law.
Look, folks.
This law will further unite all of America. Projects like Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky over the Ohio River, built 60 years ago, badly needed repairs, one of the nation's most congested freight routes, carrying $2 billion worth of freight every single day across the Ohio River. And folks, I've been talking about fixing it for decades, but we're really finally going to get it done. Yes. I went there last month with Democrats and Republicans, and from both states, to deliver a commitment of $1.6 billion for this project. And while I was there, I met a young woman named Sarah, who's here tonight. I don't know where Sarah is. Is she up in the box? I don't know. Sarah, how are you? Well, Sarah, for 30 years, I learned, she told me she'd been a proud member of the Iron Workers Local 44, known as the Cowboys in the Sky. The folks who built Cincinnati's skyline. Sarah said she can't wait to be 10 stories above the Ohio River building that new bridge. God bless her. That's pride. And that's what we're also building. We're building back pride. Look, we're also replacing poisonous lead pipes that go into 10 million homes in America, 400,000 school and child care centers. So every child in America can drink the water instead of having permanent damage to their brain. Look, we're making sure that every community in America has access to affordable high-speed internet. No parent should have to drive by McDonald's parking lot to help them do their homework online with their kids, which many thousands were doing across the country. And when we do these projects, and again, I get criticized for this, but I make no excuses for it, we're going to buy American. are going to buy America. Folks,
Listen, folks.
and it's totally consistent with international trade rules. Buy America has been the law since 1933, but for too long, past administrations, Democrat and Republican, have fought to get around it. Not anymore. Tonight, I'm announcing new standards that require all construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America. Made in America. I mean it. Lumber, glass, drywall, fiber optic cable. And on my watch, American roads, bridges, and American highways are going to be made with American products as well. Folks, my economic plan is about investing in places and people that have been forgotten. So many of you listening to me tonight, I know you feel it. So many of you felt like you've just simply been forgotten. Amid the economic upheaval of the past 4 decades, too many people have been left behind and treated like they're invisible. Maybe that's you watching from home. Remember the jobs that went away. You remember them, don't you? The folks at home remember them. You wonder whether the path even exists anymore for your children to get ahead without having to move away. Well, that's why I get that. That's why we're building an economy where no one's left behind. Jobs are coming back. Pride is coming back. Because choices we made in the last several years. You know, this is, in my view, a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America and make a real difference in your lives at home. For example, too many of you lay in bed at night like my dad did, staring at the ceiling, wondering what in God's name happens if your spouse gets cancer or your child gets deadly ill, or something happens to you. What are you going to have? You have money to pay for those medical bills? Or are you going to have to sell the house or try to get a second mortgage on it? I get it. I get it. With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interests to bring health care costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security. You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. For example, 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Many of you in this chamber do, and in the audience. But every day, millions need insulin to control their diabetes so they can literally stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years. The guy who invented it didn't even patent it because he wanted it to be available for everyone. It costs the drug companies roughly $10 a vial to make that insulin. Packaging it all, you may get up to $13. But Big Pharma has been unfairly charging people hundreds of dollars, $400 to $500 a month, making record profits. Not anymore. Not anymore. So many things that we did are only now coming to fruition. We said we were doing this, and we said we passed the law to do it, but people didn't know because the law didn't take effect until January 1 of this year. We capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. People are just finding out. I'm sure you're getting the same calls I'm getting. Look, there are millions of other Americans who do not or are not on Medicare, including 200,000 young people with type 1 diabetes who need this insulin to stay alive. Let's finish the job this time. Let's cap the cost of insulin for everybody at $35.
And of course, because the Republican Party will not get on board with this, it won't happen. Another example of something that would help people so much that the GOP stands in the way of?
Very well, I promise you all. I promise you they're going to do very well. This law also caps and won't even go into effect until 2025. Costs, out-of-pocket drug costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum of $2,000 a year. You don't have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how much your drug costs are. Because you know why? You all know it. Many of you, like many in my family, have cancer. You know the drugs can range from $10,000, $11,000, $14,000, $15,000 for the cancer drugs. If drug prices rise faster than inflation, drug companies are going to have to pay Medicare back the difference. We're finally giving Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. Bringing down prescription drug costs doesn't just save seniors money, it cuts the federal deficit by billions of dollars, by hundreds of billions.
Come on, Kevin McCarthy, you just gave a speech on that being your ambition. You should be clapping.
By Medicare to keep their commitment to the seniors. Well, guess what? Instead of paying $400 or $500 a month, you're paying $15. That's a lot of savings for the federal government. And by the way, why wouldn't we want that? Now, some members here are threatening, and I know it's not an official party position, so I'm going to exaggerate, but threatening to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. As my coach, that's okay. That's fair.
It's not fair. You should not want to do that, but okay.
Make no mistake. If you try anything to raise the cost of producing jobs, I will veto it. Look, I'm pleased to say that more Americans have health insurance now than ever in history. A record 16 million people are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. And thanks to the law I signed last year, millions are saving $800 a year on their premiums. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. So my plea to some of you, at least in this audience, let's finish the job and make these savings permanent. Expand coverage of Medicaid.
Come on, Kyrsten Sinema.
Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world to a clean energy future. I visited the devastating aftermath of record floods, droughts, storms, and wildfires from Arizona to Mexico to all the way up to the Canadian border. More timber has been burned, that I've observed from helicopters, than the entire state of Missouri. And we don't have global warming? Not a problem. In addition to emergency recovery, from Puerto Rico to Florida to Idaho, we're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind. We're going to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations installed across the country by tens of thousands of IBEW workers. And we're helping families save more than $1,000 a year with tax credits to purchase electric vehicles and efficient appliances, energy-efficient appliances. Historic conservation efforts to be responsible stewards of our land. Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren, to confront it. I'm proud of how America, at last, is stepping up to the challenge. We're still going to need oil and gas for a while. But guess what? No, we do. But there's so much more to do. We got to finish the job. And we pay for these investments in our future by finally making the wealthiest and biggest corporations begin to pay their fair share. just began. Look, I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist, but pay your fair share. I think a lot of you at home agree with me and many people that you know. The tax system is not fair. It is not fair.
We'll talk in more depth afterwards, but I do think he's doing really good.
55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks, it's simply not fair. But now, because of the law I signed, billion-dollar companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. God love them. 15%. That's less than a nurse pays. Let me be crystal clear. I said at the very beginning, under my plans, as long as I'm president, nobody earning less than $400,000 will pay an additional penny in taxes. Nobody, not one penny. But let's finish the job. There's more to do. We have to reward work, not just wealth. Pass my proposal for the billionaire minimum tax. You know, there's 1,000 billionaires in America. It's up from about 600 in the beginning of the term. But no billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or firefighter. I mean it.
And many of them pay single-digit tax rates, sometimes 1-2%.
I mean, look.
Effective tax rate, of course.
I know you aren't enthusiastic about that, but think about it. Think about it. Have you noticed Big Oil just reported its profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion in the midst of a global energy crisis. I think it's outrageous. Why? They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells, all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade. And that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding their CEOs and shareholders. Yep. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's why I propose we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term investments. They'll still make considerable profit. Let's finish the job and close the loophole to allow very wealthy to avoid paying their taxes. Instead of cutting the number of audits for wealthy taxpayers, I just signed a law to reduce the deficit by $114 billion by cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. That's
defunding of the IRS, yes.
In the last 2 years, my administration has cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion, the largest deficit reduction in American history. Under the previous administration, the American deficit went up 4 years in a row. Because those record deficits, no president added more to the national debt in any 4 years than my predecessor. Nearly 25% of the entire national debt that took over 200 years.
Watch Kevin McCarthy's face.
Added by just one administration alone, the last one. They're the facts. Check it out. Check it out. How did Congress respond to that debt? They did the right thing. They lifted the debt ceiling 3 times without preconditions or crisis. They paid American bills to prevent an economic disaster in the country. So tonight I'm asking the Congress to follow suit. Let's commit here tonight to the full faith and credit of the United States of America will never, ever be questioned. Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are.
Yes.
Instead
Go.
of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority.
True. It's not Biden's fault that people in your party have said that.
Anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal.
Why is she wearing such a thick jacket
That
inside?
means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you.
Name, Rick Scott.
Folks, the idea is that we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be started.
Wasn't it Rick Scott who proposed that, or which one? And then even Mitch McConnell had to call him out for it.
Social Security and Medicare are a lifeline for millions of seniors. Americans have to pay into them from the very first paycheck they started. So tonight, let's all agree.
Yeah, Senator Rick Scott proposed sunsetting all federal, all federal programs after 5 years if they weren't renewed by Congress. So no booing is necessary. That's what a senator in the Republican Party proposed.
Cut Medicare. Those benefits belong to the American people. They earned it. And if anyone tries to cut Social Security, which apparently no one's going to do, and if anyone tries to cut Medicare, I'll stop them. I'll veto it.
Yes.
And look, I'm not going to allow them to be taken away. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. But apparently it's not going to be a problem. Next month, when I offer my fiscal plan, I ask my Republican friends to lay down their plan as well. I really mean it. Let's sit down together and discuss our mutual plans together. Let's do that.
Their plan's simple, Biden. They just want the wealthy to be as wealthy as possible. Come on.
$2 trillion. And it won't cut a single bit of Medicare or Social Security. In fact, we're going to extend the Medicare Trust Fund at least 2 decades, because that's going to be the next argument. How do we keep it solvent, right?
Yes.
Well, we'll not raise tax on anyone making under 400 grand, but we'll pay for it the way we talked about tonight, by making sure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share. Look. Here's the deal. They aren't just taking advantage of the tax code. They're taking advantage of you, the American consumer. Here's my message to all of you out there. I have your back. We're already preventing Americans from receiving surprise medical bills, stopping $1 billion surprise bills per month so far. We're protecting seniors' life savings by cracking down on nursing homes that commit fraud, endanger patient safety, prescribe drugs that are not needed. Millions of Americans can now save thousands of dollars because they can finally get a hearing aid over the counter without a prescription. Look, capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's extortion. It's exploitation. Last year, I cracked down with the help of many of you on foreign shipping companies that were making you pay higher prices for every good coming into the country. I signed a bipartisan bill that cut shipping costs by 90%, helping American farmers, businessmen, and consumers. Let's finish the job. Pass the bipartisan legislation to strengthen antitrust enforcement and prevent big online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage. My administration is also taking on junk fees. those hidden surcharges too many companies use to make you pay more. For example, we're making airlines show you the full ticket price up front, refund your money if your flight is canceled or delayed. We've reduced exorbitant bank overdrafts by saving consumers more than $1 billion a year. We're cutting credit card late fees by 75% from $30 to $8. Look, junk fees may not matter to the very wealthy, but they matter to most other folks in homes like the one I grew up in, like many of you did. They add up to hundreds of dollars a month. They make it harder for you to pay your bills or afford that family trip. I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it. Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts. The idea that cable, internet, and cell phone companies can charge you $200 or more if you decide to switch to another provider. Give me a break. We can stop service fees on tickets to concerts and sporting events and make companies disclose all the fees up front. And we'll prohibit airlines from charging $50 round trip for family just to be able to sit together. Baggage fees are bad enough. Airlines can't treat your child like a piece of baggage. Americans are tired of being. We're tired of being played for suckers. So pass the Junk Fee Prevention Act so companies stop ripping us off. For too long, workers have been getting stiffed, but not anymore. We're beginning to restore the dignity of work. For example, I should have known this, but I didn't until 2 years ago. 30 million workers have to sign non-compete agreements with the jobs they take. 30 million. So a cashier at a burger place can't walk across town and take the same job at another burger place and make a few bucks more. It just changed. But they just changed it because we exposed it. That was part of the deal, guys. Look it up. But not anymore. We're banning those agreements so companies have to compete for workers and pay them what they're worth.
Heck yeah.
And I must tell you, this is bound to get a response from my friends on my left but the right. I'm so sick and tired of companies breaking the law by preventing workers from organizing. Pass the PRO Act, because business have a right. Workers have a right to form a union.
Unions.
Let's guarantee all workers have a living wage. Let's make sure working parents can afford to raise a family with sick days, paid family medical leave, affordable child care. That's going to enable millions of more people to go and stay at work. And let's restore the full child tax credit, which gave tens of millions of parents some breathing room and cut child poverty in half to the lowest level in history. And by the way, when we do all these things, we increase productivity. We increase economic growth. So let's finish the job and get more families access to affordable, quality housing. Let's get seniors who want to stay in their homes the care they need to do so. Let's give more breathing room to millions of family caregivers looking after their loved ones. Pass my plan so we get seniors and people with disabilities the home care and services they need. And support the workers who are doing God's work. These plans are fully paid for and we can afford to do them. Restoring the dignity of work means making education an affordable ticket to the middle class. You know, when we made public education, 12 years of it, universal in the last century, we made the best educated, best paid, we became the best educated, best paid nation in the world. But the rest of the world's caught up. It's caught up. Jill, my wife, who teaches full time, has an expression. I hope I get it right, kid. Any nation that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. Any nation that out-educates is going to out-compete us. Folks, we all know 12 years of education is not enough to win the economic competition of the 21st century. We want to have the best educated workforce. Let's finish the job by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. Studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school and go on to earn a 2 or 4 year degree, no matter their background they came from. Let's give public school teachers a raise. We're making progress by reducing student debt, increasing Pell Grants for working and middle-class families. Let's finish the job and connect students to career opportunities starting in high school. Provide access to 2 years of community college, the best career training in America, in addition to being a pathway to a 4-year degree. Let's offer every American a path to a good career, whether they go to college or not. And folks, in the midst of the COVID crisis, when schools were closed and we were shutting down everything, let's recognize how far we came in the fight against the pandemic itself. While the virus is not gone, thanks to the resilience of the American people and the ingenuity of medicine, we've broken the COVID grip on us. COVID deaths are down by 90%. We've saved millions of lives and opened up our country. We opened our country back up, and soon we'll end the public health emergency. But that's called a public health emergency. But we'll remember the toll and pain that's never going to go away. More than 1 million Americans lost their lives to COVID. 1 million. Families grieving, children orphaned, empty chairs at the dining room table constantly reminding you that she used to sit there. Remembering them, we remain vigilant. We still need to monitor dozens of variants and support new vaccines and treatments. So Congress needs to fund these efforts and keep America safe. And as we emerge from this crisis stronger, we're also got to double down on prosecuting criminals who stole relief money meant to keep workers and small businesses afloat. Before I came to office, you remember, during that campaign, the big issue was about inspector generals who would protect taxpayers' dollars who were sidelined. They were fired. Many people said we don't need them. And fraud became rampant. Last year, I told you the watchdogs are back. Since then, we've recovered billions of taxpayers' dollars. Now let's triple the anti-fraud strike force going after these criminals, double the statute of limitations on these crimes, and crack down on identity fraud by criminal syndicates stealing billions of dollars from the American people. And the data shows that for every dollar we put into fighting fraud, the taxpayers get back at least 10 times as much. It matters. It matters. Look, COVID left its scars, like the spike in violent crime in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. We have an obligation to make sure all people are safe. Public safety depends on public trust, as all of us know. But too often that trust is violated. Joining us tonight are the parents of Tyree Nichols. Welcome. We had to bury Tyree last week. As many of you personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, or playing in the park, or just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children. Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children, I never had to have the talk with them. I never had to tell them if a police officer pulls you over, turn your interior lights on right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her. When I asked her how she finds the courage to carry on and speak out. With the faith of God, she said her son was, quote, a beautiful soul, and something good will come of this. Imagine how much courage and carry that takes. It's up to us, to all of us. We all want the same thing. Neighborhoods free of violence. Law enforcement who earns the community's trust. Just as every cop, when they pin on that badge in the morning, has a right to be able to go home at night, so does everybody else out there. Our children have a right to come home safely. Equal protection under the law is a covenant we have with each other in America. We know police officers put their lives on the line every single night and day. And we know we ask them in many cases to do too much, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, responding to drug overdoses, mental health crises, and so much more. In one sense, we ask much too much of them. I know most cops and their families are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. But they risk and they risk their lives every time they put that shield on. But what happened to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. We have to do better. Give law enforcement the real training they need. Hold them to higher standards. Help them succeed in keeping us safe. We also need more first responders and professionals to address the growing mental health, substance abuse challenges. More resources to reduce violent crime and gun crime. More community intervention programs. More investment in housing, education, and job training. All this can help prevent violence in the first place. And when police officers or police departments violate the public trust, they must be held accountable. With the support of the families of victims, civil rights groups, and law enforcement, I signed an executive order for all federal officers, banning chokeholds, restricting no-knock warrants, and other key elements of the George Floyd Act. Let's commit ourselves to make the words of Tyler's mom true. Something good must come from this. Something good. And all of us, folks, it's difficult, but it's simple. All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts that we need to do. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform. Do something. Do something. That was the plea of parents who lost their children in Uvalde. I met with every one of them. Do something about gun violence. Thank God. Thank God we did. Passing the most sweeping gun safety law in 3 decades.
Far from enough.
That the majority of responsible gun owners already support. Enhanced background checks for 18 to 21 years old. Red flag laws, keeping guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and others. But we know our work is not done. Joining us tonight is Brandon Say, a 26-year-old hero. Brandon put his college dreams on hold to be at his mom's side. His mom's side when she was dying from cancer. And Brandon now works at the dance studio started by his grandparents. And 2 weeks ago, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, he heard the studio door close, and he saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, but he thought about the people inside. And in that instant, he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all. I led the fight to do that in 1994. And in 10 years, that ban was law, mass shootings went down. After we let it expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons. And let's also come together on immigration. Make it a bipartisan issue once again. We now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers, seizing over 23,000 pounds of fentanyl in just the last several months. We've launched a new border plan last month. Unlawful migration from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela has come down 97% as a consequence of that. But American border problems won't be fixed until Congress acts. If we don't pass my comprehensive immigration reform, at least pass my plan to provide the equipment and officers to secure the border. And a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those on temporary status, farm workers, essential workers.
As we've talked about so much on the show, they'll fearmonger about the border, but Republicans won't actually support solutions.
Congress must restore the right and the Congress must restore the right that was taken away in Roe v. Wade and protect Roe v. Wade. Give every woman a consular right. The Vice President and I are doing everything to protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient safety. But already more than a dozen states are enforcing extreme abortion bans. Make no mistake about it. If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it. But let's also pass the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example. Let's remember the world's watching. I spoke from this chamber 1 year ago, just days after Vladimir Putin unleashed his brutal attack against Ukraine. A murderous assault, evoking images of death and destruction Europe suffered in World War II. Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages, a test for America, a test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? We stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Will we stand for the defense of democracy? For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity. 1 year later, we know the answer. Yes, we would, and we did. We did. And together, we did what America always does at our best. We led. We united NATO. We built a global coalition. We stood against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people. Tonight, we're once again joined by Ukrainian's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people. Our ambassador is here, we're united in our support of your country. Will you stand so we can all take a look at you? Thank you. Because we're going to stand with you as long as it takes. Our nation's working for more freedom, more dignity, more peace, not just in Europe, but everywhere. Before I came to office, the story was about how the People's Republic of China was increasing its power and America was failing in the world. Not anymore. We made clear, and I made clear in my personal conversations, which have been many, with President Xi, that we seek competition, not conflict. But I will make no apologies that we're investing to make America stronger, investing in American innovation and industries that will define the future that China intends to be dominating, investing in our alliances and working with our allies to protect advanced technologies so they will not be used against us, modernizing our military to safeguard stability and deter aggression. Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Anyone else in the world. And I'm committed. I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did. Look.
True. Took that balloon down.
Let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us. We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying the world to meet those challenges, from climate to global health, to food insecurity, to terrorism, to territorial aggression. Allies are stepping up, spending more, and doing more. Look, the bridges we're forming between partners in the Pacific and those in the Atlantic, and those who bet against America are learning how wrong they are. It's never, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never. Well, when I came to office, most assured that bipartisanship assumed was impossible, but never believed it. That's why a year ago I offered a unity agenda to the nation as I stood here. We made real progress together. We passed a law making it easy for doctors to prescribe effective treatments for opioid addiction. We passed the gun safety law, making historic investments in mental health. We launched the ARPA-H drive for breakthrough in the fights against cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, and so much more. We passed the Heath Robinson PACT Act, named after the late Iraq War veteran whose story about exposure to toxic burn kits I shared here last year. I understand something about those burn pits, but there's so much more to do. We can do it together. Joining us tonight is a father named Doug from Newton, New Hampshire. He wrote Jill, my wife, a letter, and me as well, about his courageous daughter, Courtney. A contagious laugh, his sister's best friend, her sister's best friend. He shared a story all too familiar to millions of Americans and many of you in the audience. Courtney discovered pills in high school. It spiraled into addiction and eventually death from a fentanyl overdose. She was just 20 years old. Describing the last 8 years without her, Doug said, "There's no worse pain." Yet their family has turned pain to purpose, working to end the stigma and change laws. He told us he wants to start a journey toward American recovery. Doug, we're with you. Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. You got it. So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs. Strong penalties to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. Second, let's do more on mental health, especially for our children. When millions of young people are struggling with bullying, violence, trauma, we give them greater access to mental health care at their schools. We must finally hold social media companies accountable for experimenting they're doing running children for profit. It's time to pass bipartisan legislation to stop big tech from collecting personal data on our kids and teenagers online. Ban targeted advertising to children and impose stricter limits on the personal data that companies collect on all of us. Third, let's do more to keep this nation's one truly sacred obligation to equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home. Job training, job placement for veterans and their spouses as they come to return to civilian life. Helping veterans afford their rent, because no one should be homeless in America, especially someone who served the country. Dennis McDonough is here of the VA. We had a first real discussion when I asked him to take the job. I'm glad he did. We were losing up to 25 veterans a day on suicide. Now we're losing 17 a day to the silent scourge of suicide. 17 veterans a day are committing suicide. More than all the people being killed in the wars. Folks, VA is doing everything it can, including expanding mental health screening, proven programs that recruits veterans to help other veterans understand what they're going through, get them the help they need. We got to do more. And fourth, last year, Jill and I reignited the cancer moonshot that I was able to start with President Obama asked me to lead our administration on this issue. Our goal is to cut the cancer death rates at least by 50% in the next 25 years. Turn more cancers from death sentences to treatable diseases. Provide more support for patients and their families. It's personal to so many of us in this audience. Joining us are Morris and Candice, an Irishman and the daughter of immigrants from Panama. They met and fell in love in New York City and got married in the same chapel Jill and I got married in New York City. Kindred spirits. He wrote us a letter about his little daughter, Ava, and I saw her just before I came over. She was just a year old when she was diagnosed with rare kidney disease, cancer. After 26 blood transfusions, 11 rounds of radiation, 8 rounds of chemo, 1 kidney removed, giving a 5% survival rate. He wrote how in the darkest moments he thought, if she goes, I can't stay. Many of you have been through that as well. Jill and I understand that like so many of you. And he read Jill's book describing our family's cancer journey and how we tried to steal moments of joy where we could with Bo. For them, that glimmer of joy was the half smile of their baby girl. It meant everything to them. They never gave up hope. Little Ava never gave up hope. She turns 4 next month. They just found out Ava's beating the odds, is on her way to being cured of cancer. And she's watching from the White House tonight if she's not asleep already. For the lives we can save. For the lives we can save and the lives we've lost, let this be a truly American moment that rallies the country and the world together and proves that we can still do big things. 20 years ago, under the leadership of President Bush and countless advocates and champions, he undertook a bipartisan effort through PEPFAR to transform the global fight against HIV/AIDS. It's been a huge success. He thought big. He thought large. He moved. I believe we can do the same thing with cancer. Let's end cancer as we know it. Cure some cancers once and for all. Folks, there's one reason why we've been able to do all of these things. Our democracy itself. It's the most fundamental thing of all. With democracy, everything's possible. Without it, nothing is. For the last few years, our democracy has been threatened and attacked, put at risk, put to the test in this very room on January the 6th. And then just a few months ago, an unhinged big lie assailed and unleashed a political violence, the home of the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, using the very same language the insurrectionists used as they stalked these halls and chanted on January 6th. Here tonight in this chamber is a man who bears the scars of that brutal attack, but is as tough and as strong, as resilient as they get. My friend Paul Pelosi. Paul, stand up. But such a heinous act should have never happened. We must all speak out. There's no place for political violence in America. We have to protect the right to vote, not suppress the fundamental right. Honor the results of our elections, not subvert the will of the people. We have to uphold the rule of law and restore trust in our institutions of democracy. And we must give hate and extremism in any form no safe harbor. Democracy must not be a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment where they have been called to protect our democracy, defend it, stand up for it. And this is our moment. My fellow Americans, we meet tonight at an inflection point, one of those moments that only a few generations ever face, where the direction we now take is going to decide the course of this nation for decades to come. We're not bystanders of history. We're not powerless before the forces that confront us. It's within our power of we, the people. We're facing the test of our time. We have to be the nation we've always been at our best, optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking. A nation that embraces light over dark, hope over fear, unity over division, stability over chaos. We have to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. We're good people. The only nation in the world built on an idea, the only one. Other nations are defined by geography, ethnicity, but we're the only nation based on an idea that all of us, every one of us, is created equal in the image of God. A nation that stands as a beacon to the world. A nation in a new age of possibilities. So I've come to fulfill my constitutional obligation to report in the State of the Union. And here's my report. Because the soul of this nation is strong, because the backbone of this nation is strong, because the people of this nation are strong, the State of the Union is strong. I'm not new to this place. I stand here tonight having served as long as about any one of you have ever served here. But I've never been more optimistic about our future, about the future of America. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
And we have been listening to.
All right, there we go. Hopefully this time PBS will cut to the response. The Republican, let me see, I'm muted, okay. The Republican response, let's see, Republican response, State of Union, just to make sure I don't miss it. Y'all let me know if it pops up somewhere that we're not watching. Okay, so as far as my take on this, I think within the expectations I had, Biden really nailed it, and compared to other states of the union, pretty good. So I'll just go through a few things that struck me. I think he nicely outlined, and maybe I'll cut to this angle while we go through this. Y'all can see I'm perspirating now. He nicely outlined his successes and proposals, but not just listing them off. Quickly going through how they apply to and why they matter to a working person. I think he did a good job of explaining, even down to the smaller stuff. When you get over to proposals, the junk fees is a good example of something that isn't discussed in national politics too often. It's not as major as, for example, capping the cost of insulin for Medicare recipients, but it's still something people want to know that you're at work on. And so going through some of those smaller things and the bigger stuff, expanding the Affordable Care Act, investing in climate change response, largest investment in infrastructure in the last however many years, capping the cost of insulin, like I said, for Medicare recipients, lowering prescription drug costs through allowing Medicare to negotiate prices. So important. And then I was just thinking, guys, during this speech, how many things that are so good and would help the American people so much aren't getting done because of one singular entity, the Republican Party, the GOP. When he was talking about the PRO Act, the child tax credit, capping the cost of insulin for everyone, even though Medicare recipients now will see that, lowering prescription drug costs for everyone, free preschool, free community college, and you can go on with the list. There are so many incredible things. The voting rights legislation, that would be so crucial and helpful to the American public that don't happen because of the GOP. Another thing he focused on was bipartisanship, that I think resonates with a lot of people, and I do think it's important to touch on, just saying, listen, this wasn't all just the Democratic Party, even though, of course, he should, looks like someone's disagreeing severely with me. Even though, of course, you need to make sure that viewers know that the Democratic Party is responsible for getting all of this through. It also resonates, especially because he campaigned so much on it, that some of this was bipartisan, but so much that we could get done is getting prevented by the Republican Party. So I think that's an important message. I wish he had touched a little bit more specifically on the radical part of the Republican Party, not as aggressive as he has in his democracy speeches. The State of the Union has to strike a different tone, but at least saying something to the effect of, the Republican Party has a history of, this is how he would phrase it, many friends of mine, the Republican Party has a history of great leaders, and I plead with you not to allow your party to get taken over by election denying. Maybe that wouldn't be his style, but that's, I think, something that could have been very impactful. And not to say it in a particularly divisive way, but just to recognize this is the threat I'm talking about. When I say our democracy is being threatened, this is what I'm talking about. the Republican Party, I plead with you to not allow your party to be taken over by individuals who are so radical, who are so detached from reality. I think he did a nice job of managing the people shouting at him. Anytime you're in this type of setting, you want to come off as the adult in the room. So if they're yapping at you and shouting things out, just kind of either smiling or waiting a moment, continue with your speech, or as he did, slightly poking fun at it with the Medicare Social Security sunset thing that they got very upset with. And he said, looks like no one's going to do it, which is good because it highlights something we don't want the Republican Party to do, which is sunset Medicare and Social Security every 5 years. If it isn't renewed, if those two things aren't renewed. And it's funny because they pretend like no one in their party during that moment in time have put that forward, even though Rick Scott is on record saying, and he's a senator, pretty relevant senator too, Medicare and Social Security should sunset every 5 years if they're not renewed by Congress. So Biden was being honest there. And then definitely just the mentions of democracy he did do were definitely important. I'm definitely missing things. Oh, I think focusing a lot on just economic, and I guess the term people use a lot is kitchen table issues. I think that's a little cheesy sometimes, but kitchen table issues that affect working people, that are economic oftentimes. He spent a lot of the speech on that. And I think he struck a nice balance between what you would call the fluffy stuff. So kind of just, we can do anything, which can be impactful, but it's not a policy position. And the policy tangible stuff. I think that was a nice balance because you want some of the fluff, you want some of the kind of inspirational moments, of course, but you do want to walk through the stuff that impacts very materially the lives of the American people. He called out the powerful and wealthy and talked about what his administration is doing to make them pay their fair share and, trying to balance that power equation a little bit in our country. So overall, pretty positive. I always think at the end of these speeches, as far as the promises go, he's not going to be able to accomplish a lot of the things that he put forward there, especially in the next 2 years. The House of Representatives having a majority of Republicans is just going to prevent any significant success to get through, most likely, with the current GOP we have. And he has, gotten through a lot of accomplishments. So I think being able to list those off is important. And even calling out the fact that some of this you won't be able to feel for a little bit. It takes a second to get put into effect. I think calling for the ban of assault weapons was important. Again, some of the time I was writing down stuff, some of the times I just got lost in kind of reading the chat and watching. So I'm sure I'm missing very important aspects of this. The law enforcement related stuff, I think he could have expanded a little bit more on that. I do think it was impactful to have Tyree Nichols' family there. But there are so many different proposals that have been put forward and blocked by the GOP. And again, I'm not within the staff of the president, within the White House or anything like that. So I don't know what types of conversations go on and what the things they see as inappropriate for this context and what they'd see as appropriate. But I do think a little bit more making clear to the viewers the things that I'm talking about, the Democratic Party supports. The only reason you're not seeing, for example, just to grab one thing, a child tax credit that lifted half of children out of poverty, that cut childhood poverty in half, is because of the Republican Party. And he can say it, my friends on the other side, however he says it. But making that clear is important because if it's this nebulous, I don't know, things just haven't gotten through yet, people don't recognize who's really to blame. And the blame in this type of situation is super, super important. because that's how Americans know who they're supposed to go out and vote for, or who maybe be convinced on that a little bit, nudged on that when you hear a lot of the proposals that you agree with from Joe Biden. Because within the day-to-day political back and forth that we experience, I don't, but it's more likely someone can get lost within the right, within the conservative movement. But if you're watching Joe Biden, you're kind of in the middle and you're hearing a lot of things that are just overwhelmingly popular that he wants to get through. And if he would make clear the reason why you're not benefiting from these proposals and they aren't yet law is because of the GOP, that could sway people for sure, and motivate Democrats who will support him already, someone like myself, but don't always hear the message. I do, because I cover politics every day, but someone who's aligned with me politically, who wants to know that the person they voted for has actually accomplished some of those things. But obviously a lot of what he ran on has not gotten through. That can't be ignored. I have not heard one single chatter of the public option, for example, that he talked about a lot during his campaign. But it has to be recognized, and this is where I split a little bit from some of those on the left, that reality is reality. The Senate is split, or it was for the last 2 years, 50-50. Now it's 51-50, sort of. Kirsten Sinema somewhere in there. But even the House didn't have a huge margin. And it's going to be really tough with Manchin and Sinema in the Senate, who you have to get both of those individuals over the last 2 years to get something you would have never gotten the public option done. So I don't even blame Biden as an individual or the Democratic Party, besides some of those obstructionists, as much as some other people do, because like I said at the beginning of this rant, reality is reality. Now, I think Biden could have done a better job of fighting for these things over the last 2 years. This is more rhetorical, this is more optics, but as we've talked about previously, one of his weaknesses, especially recently, is the optical related things. It is the communication. And so he may not have been super effective in that, even if he had been out there more aggressively pushing for some of this. But within the context of how divided the government was, within the context of how moderate some of the Democratic senators are, or conservative, I should say, there have been some significant successes. And I think him making that clear in the speech was important, and hopefully will impact some of the viewers. If he ends up running for re-election, it looks like he's going to, and let's say in 2024, the Democrats take back the House and the Senate, which would be hugely important. I really hope they'll address some of these things that he put forward as promises. Like I said, no chance in the next 2 years, unfortunately, for some of the bigger things, because the Republican Party will block it all. But maybe later. It is sad, guys, that one party, like I said, one entity is blocking so much, so much, and so many things that would benefit the lives of many of us and many people generally. I'm wondering if I really want to catch the different responses to this, but yeah, y'all let me know what you think in the chat of the speech overall. What did I leave off that list as far as takeaways? I will say, I think the Democratic Party needs to lean way more and make it a daily issue they're talking about into unionizations, the fight for environments where unionizing is possible, the defending of unions' rights and the right to unionize. Because so many of the issues we talk about, I would want on a universal basis, but if we could promote unions in a far more impactful way, those problems would become less present, if that makes sense. So, paid family leave, I think we should absolutely have that federally. But unions will advocate on an individual basis for their members for something like that. higher wages, when we talk about minimum wage, a much more effective way in my mind to ensure people have fair wages and we don't have to have kind of a one-size-fits-all approach is unions across the board in so many of these different industries. And Biden did run as a very pro-union president, which was good, and there's limited things, obviously, within that issue that the president by himself can do. And I think his rhetoric has been good most of the time, better than most presidents. Obviously, the railroad strike was definitely an issue there, where he got into bad graces, we'll say. Not the best of graces with the union world because of that whole debacle. But I really do think he mentioned the PRO Act very briefly, but that's a super important issue that I wish was focused on more. We didn't get any real noticeable shout outs, meaning screams from the audience. I did hear Marjorie Taylor Greene once pretty clearly. There's just no reason. It's so petty to just be screaming like, oh, what point are you making? You just make your party look like a bunch of children.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, when she was a member of Congress, who helped shepherd it through. And it all fell apart over qualified immunity and other things. But now the idea that you would get a George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or any kind of police reform through the Congress that is there now is wishful thinking. I do think that the White House, the president in particular, and certainly Majority Leader Schumer and Minority.
So as I mentioned at the top of the live stream, I think maybe this was the one we started and had to stop, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is delivering the Republican response, so I do want to see that. And if the Democratic response is pretty quick, we'll watch that as well. If it takes too long for the Republican response to come through, then I will bounce because I'm about to sleep, about to fall asleep on this microphone, even though it's only 9:39. Strange day.
They're saying to Black Americans, we don't care. And from all the meetings that I've been to today, from listening to the President of the United States, there's no doubt in my mind that they care and that they want to do something. It's just too bad that folks on the other side of the aisle can't meet them even halfway.
Well, to your point, I mean, on this issue, it's Republicans that hold all the cards.
Yeah, I gotta say too, on so many of these different issues, the Republican Party purports to care so much about one of them and then is the reason that there's no solution successfully pushed through. You have the border. Biden has put forward solutions on the border. Republicans have not gone for. The Democratic Party has put forward solutions on investing more appropriately on border security, but then also on the legal immigration system. You have so many now, of course, I'm blanking, kind of trying to think of their top issues. The border obviously is one of them, but fentanyl is another example, which is the border, but a more specific element of it that they weren't getting excited for, obviously. And even some of the successes that they don't talk a lot about, but they should, when they pretend to be for the working class, stand up and applaud when he's talking about cutting costs and saving the government money. Oh, that would be another one. The deficit. Biden talked about the deficit getting decreased under him, and Kevin McCarthy was shaking his head, even though they purport to care so much about doing just that. Can you imagine the GOP being disingenuous? Shocking.
Well, I think it's the president's focus on bipartisanship that is so important as we go into this new divided Congress. I also think he made some strong statements about what we have achieved and how it's going to impact the future, and then made some pleas to people in the chamber to continue this work, to make sure we continue to move forward on infrastructure and reshoring American manufacturing and our strategic competition with China. And it was good to hear the president stand up to that, because I know within the caucus.
Oh, that's another one. China competition type stuff, he's actually done a good bit on that front. And of course, many Republicans still think he's beholden to China.
Spy balloon from China. A lot of Republicans accusing him of not moving fast enough. Do you think the president did enough to quell some of those concerns?
You know, I was just in a House Armed Services Committee hearing this morning on China, and that question was presented to the former Indo-PACOM admiral. Did we act quickly enough? And he seemed very pleased with that situation. He complimented the administration on being thoughtful from everything he's seen, and certainly recovering the information from that surveillance equipment since we shot it down over the water. So I am still delving into the situation and getting more information tomorrow morning from a classified briefing. But from what I have heard to date, it seems as if there was a thoughtful reaction, as long as we can assure ourselves that that surveillance balloon was being jammed during the whole time it was over our country.
Congresswoman, there were clearly some areas of disagreement between the president and Republican members in that chamber, but we did see some Republicans applauding at certain moments of the president's remarks as well, specifically things like supply chain and economic policies and steps he was proposing and touting. As you look ahead to this divided Congress, where do you see the shared areas of interest where you believe Democrats and Republicans can work together to get something done?
Well, you certainly laid out some of the obvious ones, right? I was on the Defense Critical Supply Chain Task Force. My base, Picatinny Arsenal, does so much with our munitions supply chain, and we look at rare earth minerals and where we are receiving goods into the supply chain, making it more resilient. So that's an area, defense and otherwise, that we can all work together and we all agree must be addressed. There are other things like rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, reshoring American manufacturing. There was a lot of support in that chamber for Made in America and building with American-made goods. I think these are areas of broad bipartisan support. And then there are areas where I will be looking if we can't come together and build that bipartisan support. For example, on child care. As a working mom of 4 kids, we know that investments in child care are going to be investments in strengthening our economy. The president discussed Head Start, such a key piece of how we impact the future and the future of our children. So those are areas that might not be as obvious, but when you lay out the case of how important they are to the economy and how important they are to getting people back in our workforce, every single member of Congress right now is hearing about workforce shortages with these fantastic jobs numbers. We need people back in the workforce. So child care will be an area I will be looking for bipartisan support on.
That is Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill of New Jersey joining us tonight. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Amy Walter, in many ways, this State of the Union address can be viewed as a soft launch of President Biden's re-election campaign. We don't know when he's going to announce. I don't think we've certainly not talked to a White House official yet who has said the president's not going to run for office. He used the phrase in the speech tonight, finish the job. He used that phrase 12 times about implementing infrastructure, the infrastructure law, shoring up Medicare, expanding education access, police reform, gun reform. This seems like if he's not able to get this done in the next 2 years, this was him saying, hold on, folks.
That's my re-election
that's the re-election
campaign
pitch.
theme, right. And I think what you're going to hear from Republicans, especially what we're already starting to hear from people like Nikki Haley, like Ron DeSantis, is we're going to make a generational change, right? So he may want to finish the job. We think another generation needs to step in to be able to do that. So that's going to be, you can already sort of see the battle lines drawing up then on what the two, contrasting messages are going to be. Absolutely.
We're set to hear shortly from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the Arkansas governor. I'm told one of the reasons why Republicans selected her was to make this contrast of age.
Yes.
She's 40 years old. She's
That's
half
right.
President Biden's age. She's also, we should say, half of Donald Trump's age,
Right.
for that matter. But it was also important to have a Republican who is not going to run for office, for the presidency.
It's that, and also somebody who comes from a red state, who is not feeling at all encumbered by worrying about what is this going to do for her own sort of chances. Usually these responses have been given to the rising star, the person that they think, okay, this is somebody on the bench who we're going to see run for much higher office. But it never has worked out that well for that person. So now it seems like what they're putting up front is the generational change, and also somebody who been in and around the Trump orbit and knows how to fight very well with Democrats.
And we're going to listen to that message in just a moment. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the new governor of Arkansas, is delivering the Republican response to the State of the Union tonight from Little Rock. She's no stranger to a presidential address. Sanders previously served as the White House press secretary for the first 2 years of the Trump administration. Let's go live now to Governor Sanders.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Being a mom to 3 young children taught me not to believe every story I hear. So forgive me for not believing much of anything I heard tonight from President Biden. From out of control inflation and violent crime to the dangerous border crisis and threat from China, Biden and the Democrats have failed you. They know it, and you know it. And it's time for a change. Tonight, let us reaffirm our commitment to a timeless American idea that government exists not to rule the people, but to serve the people. Democrats want to rule us with more government control, but that's not who we are. America is the greatest country the world has ever known because we're the freest country the world has ever known, with a people who are strong and resilient. 5 months ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. It was a hard time for our family, particularly our kids, Scarlett, Huck, and George. But we kept our faith and persevered. Thanks to exceptional doctors here in Arkansas, a successful surgery, and the grace of God, I am cancer-free. Through it all, I couldn't help but think about my mom. She was 20 years old and in her first year of marriage when she was diagnosed with spinal cancer. The doctors told her she might not live, and if she did live, they said she'd never walk again. And if she did walk, she'd definitely never have children. The daughter she was told she'd never have.
And all of these procedures should have been covered by the government, because some people who didn't have the money that your family has would not have been able to get the care that you got.
Us. But faith propels us to charge boldly ahead. We can't stand still in the face of great challenges. You and I were put on this earth for such a time as this, to charge boldly ahead. I'll be the first to admit, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. I'm for freedom, he's for government control. At 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country. And at 80, he's the oldest president in American history. I'm the first woman to lead my state, and he's the first man to surrender his presidency to a woke mob that can't even tell you what a woman is.
I can tell you.
In the radical left's America, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. But you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race, but not to love one another or our great country. Whether Joe Biden believes this madness.
Is she talking about fictional America? What is this? Democrats aren't pushing for you to hate one another on the basis of your race. They're pushing for you to learn history so that we can create a world where we don't have the inequality on the lines of race that we have now because of our love for other people.
Upon taking office just a few weeks ago, I signed executive orders to ban CRT, racism, and indoctrination.
And then got asked, hey, CRT isn't taught in Arkansas, and she didn't have a good answer.
Government repealed COVID orders and said never again to authoritarian mandates and shutdowns. Americans want common sense from their leaders. But in Washington, the Biden administration is doubling down on crazy. President Biden inherited the fastest economic recovery on record, the most secure border in history, cheap, abundant, homegrown energy, fast rising wages, a rebuilt military, and a world that was stable and at peace.
Biden came in and COVID was still wrecking us. What are you talking about?
Despite Democrats' trillions in reckless spending and mountains of debt, we now have the worst border crisis in American history.
A quarter of the debt was under Trump, and Democrats have put forward solutions on the border. Republicans have blocked them.
100,000 Americans a year are now killed from drug overdoses, largely from fentanyl pouring across our southern border. Yet the Biden administration refuses to secure the border and save American lives.
It's the party that you're a part of that has blocked their initiatives that would have helped secure the border. Oh, this is all so annoying to watch and dishonest.
While law-abiding families live in fear. Beyond our border, from Afghanistan to Ukraine, from North Korea to Iran, President Biden's weakness puts our nation and the world at risk. And the president's refusal to stand up to China, our most formidable adversary, is dangerous.
He has invested in China competition related to legislation. And on the issue of the balloon, we just got reporting that it was the increase in defenses against Chinese espionage that allowed the intelligence apparatus around the Biden administration to identify this balloon, and is the reason why, because these defenses were just recently increased by the Biden administration, these balloons were not identified under the Trump administration. We have a segment coming out about that. Just so funny how wrong they were about the whole balloon situation, even though, I mean, it's just another one of those random things they blew out of proportion. But
with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. That's not normal. It's crazy, and it's wrong. Make no mistake, Republicans will not surrender this fight.
Didn't your former boss and current ally call for the termination of the Constitution where the First Amendment is established?
Where strong families thrive in safe communities, where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising, where the freedom our veterans shed their blood to defend is the birthright of every man, woman, and child. These are the principles Republican governors are fighting for.
As we walked through extensively on the show in the past, red states disproportionately experience worse metrics on all these different things: education, crime, poverty. And so I don't think I want red governor policies across the country.
I will never forget watching my dad, Governor Mike Huckabee, and President Bill Clinton hold the doors open to the Little Rock Nine. Doors that 40 years earlier had been closed to them because they were black. Today, those children once barred from the schoolhouse are now heroes memorialized in bronze at our State House. I'm proud of the progress our country has made, and I believe giving every child access to a quality education, regardless of their race or income, is the civil rights issue of our day. Tomorrow, I will unveil an education package that will be the most far-reaching, bold, conservative education reform in the country.
So I agree with the premise that we should have an education system that invests in all children and all that, but her solutions won't be good. Thank you so much to Scott, who sent a super chat and said, "Luke, great job with the channel. I enjoy your content." Thank you so much.
In the nation. Here in Arkansas and across America, Republicans are working to end the policy of trapping kids in failing schools and sentencing them to a lifetime of poverty. We will educate, not indoctrinate our kids, and put students on a path to success.
No, all these bills seek to do is indoctrinate them with the conservative indoctrination. When they say don't indoctrinate, all they mean is, can we go back to when we indoctrinated kids in the way that we liked?
Shaped by economic booms and stock market busts, forged by the triumph of the Cold War and the tragedy of 9/11. A generation brimming with passion and new ideas to solve age-old problems. A generation moored to our deepest values and oldest traditions, yet unafraid to challenge the present order and find a better way forward. If we seize this moment together, America can once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave. During my 2.5 years at the White House, I traveled on every foreign trip with the president. A trip I will never forget was on December 25th of 2018. My husband Brian and I had just cleaned up wrapping paper that was shoved into every corner of our house, thanks to our 3 kids. When I had to walk out on my own family's Christmas, unable to tell them where I was going that night, because the place I'd be traveling was so dangerous, they didn't want anybody to know that the president was going to be on the ground, even for a few hours. We boarded Air Force One in complete and total darkness. There were no lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. Our phones and computers shut down and turned in. We were going completely off the grid. Nearly 12 hours later, in the pitch black of night, we landed in the war-torn part of Western Iraq. It was again a similar scene. No lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. The only thing you could see was coming from about a mile away in a dining hall where hundreds of troops who were in the fight against ISIS had gathered expecting to celebrate Christmas with senior military leadership from around the region. They had absolutely no idea that the president and first lady were about to walk into that room. And when they did, it was a sight and a scene and a sound I hope I never forget. The room erupted. Men and women from every race, religion, and region, every political party, every demographic you can imagine, started chanting in perfect unison over and over and over again, USA, USA, USA. It was an absolutely perfect picture of what makes our country great. One of the young soldiers yelled from the back, "Mr. President, I re-enlisted in the military because of you." And the president said, "And son, I'm here because of you." Shortly after, that young soldier came up to me. He said, "Sarah, you have a tough job." I told him, "What I do is nothing. You take bombs and bullets. That's a tough job." And in a moment that I know I'll cherish for the rest of my life, that soldier reached up and he pulled the Brave Rifles patch he wore on his shoulder, and he placed it into my hand, a sign of ultimate respect. And he said, "Sarah, we are in this together." Overwhelmed with emotion and speechless, I just hugged him with tears in my eyes and a grateful heart for our heroes who keep us free. That young man and everyone who has served before him, all of those who serve alongside him, and the thousands we know who will be called upon to serve after him, deserve to know they have a country and a community back home doing our part in the fight for freedom. America is great because we are free. But today, our freedom is under attack, and the America we love is in danger. President Biden and the Democrats have failed you, and it's time for a change. A new generation of Republican leaders are stepping up, not to be caretakers of the status quo, but to be change makers for the American people. We know not what the future holds.
I'm so bored.
But we know who holds the future in his hands. And with God as our witness, we will show the world that America is still the place where freedom reigns and liberty will never die. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
And we have...
Okay. You'll notice she didn't address any of the policy things that Biden laid out. It's this general nebulous, detached from reality. The Democrats are taking away all of your freedom, and it's, so sad. This is, what we would expect from a modern day Republican response for the most part. There's some Republicans that actually could get into the nitty gritty of some of the policy stuff he mentioned and be brave enough to disagree. But for the most part, a lot of the policy issues Biden laid out there are just popular. And so coming out against, for example, lower prescription drugs, saying you want higher prescription drugs, or explicitly saying she wants the powerful to stay as powerful as they are, doesn't want the government to properly get the tax money from the wealthiest Americans that we should be getting, or explicitly saying, I don't want impoverished children to have their parents get a little bit more money in their pocket to be able to raise their children, or whatever it might be. I don't want that extra person to get healthcare because of the expansion of the Affordable Care Act. And so instead it has to be, oh, our freedom's under attack. I don't have a specific example of that, but woke and CRT. And that nicely sums up kind of the platform of many Republicans these days, which is unfortunate because we're not actually having meaningful policy discussions that matter. Policy matters so much. And instead, we have to debunk why it's not true that a graduate level course or, a higher ed level course is not being taught, or we have to debunk the fact that it is being taught in elementary schools, as she has made a core part of her message being CRT in schools. And we have to fight back against the hateful rhetoric towards different groups of people instead of talking about solutions to real problems that people face every single day. And so, again, expected, but every time I watch most speeches from Republicans these days, it makes me different emotions, but I think the reoccurring one and the remaining one after it's all said and done is sad, because I do agree that the United States is unique in its in the value of its potential, I guess, or the potential of its value. And I do think the United States is 100% the strongest country in the world. And so then we have a lot of responsibility in how we use that strength, and we have a lot of potential in how we could use it both abroad but domestically. We have so much wealth compared to other countries as a collective country. And so we could do such amazing things with those facts I just said. But because of obstructionists, because of the political incentives of many, not just in the Republican Party, but disproportionately in the Republican Party, we have to set all of those incredible potential successes aside while we fight about the very essence of reality, while we fight about what a fact is, while we fight about, and I'll go back to the example of, oh, they're trying to teach your children to hate each other based on their race. That's what the Democrats want. And we have to debate why that's not true, instead of talking about some of the stuff Biden laid out that was just good, that were just good actions that the federal government should be taking, some that it is now taking under Biden, some that hasn't yet been accomplished because of some in the Democratic Party and usually all of the Republican Party. And it really is sad to see. And it bums me out that that's the state of our country right now. But I am so pooped if you can't tell. So I'm going to wrap it up. Much love to you all. Thank you for being here. And I will